clusters in our communities. Like all of these things matter to us. And so I think part and parcel with our power is really taking ownership of all of the places where we belong, standing confidently in all of the places where we should, which is everywhere. And I really think about using everything we have, using every tool we already have inside of us to really create access and the ability to thrive for everybody. I think that that's both a moral and spiritual pursuit as much as it's a political and policy one. And I think that can be a difficult nuance sometimes, but I spend a lot of time listening to my elders on this, listening to how they talk about, yes, while we were pursuing, this political change or this policy change, we were also doing work on our own internalized racism. We were also doing work on how we let go of the shackles of what whiteness told us about who we are, right? About how we stop allowing whiteness and white supremacy to define who we are, what makes us valuable, what makes us important, what makes us beautiful. And so I think that both of those things have to happen at the same time for us to really harness our power, for us to really hold our power, and for us to really take advantage of our power such that every person on this planet, and every Black person in particular, really has the ability to lead a thriving life, whatever that looks like for them.
It's so important because you touched on this aspect of how, on the one hand, people try to get us to think we don't have power, but then once they get kind of resigned that, okay, the Negroes done figured it out, then they try to be like, well, this is how you should use it, right? This is what your issue should be. This is how you should direct all that energy. So even in acknowledging our power, they still try to control our power.
Yep. Absolutely. And this is, I don't have to tell you, this is what this fight about voter suppression is about, right? Because we have power. If you didn't know we had power, you wouldn't be working so damn hard to make sure we couldn't express said power, right, in this particular way. So you're gerrymandering us to hell. You are closing our precincts. You are making it impossible for us to vote by mail. You're purging us from voter rolls. You're doing all of the things because you know we're powerful. And so simultaneously, you will try to control how we use our power and diminish our ability to manifest our power, right? And that you only do that if you believe that your opposition is a powerful people. You only do that if you believe that the army you're up against can actually defeat the supremacy that you hold so dear. And so I think that it's high time that we recognize that, right? That we recognize that the ways in which we operate naturally and culturally are powerful, that the ways in which we organize communally, that we are thinking never just of the one, but of the many. That's not what rugged individualism teaches us. That's not what white dominant culture teaches us, but it's what's allowed us to be successful. It's what has allowed us to build our own institutions. It's what has allowed us to protect one another. I think about some of my friends from the streets of Ferguson who have transitioned their work in a lot of ways. I think about my friend Kayla Reed, who works a lot on electoral justice. Kayla, she leads Action St. Louis. Yes. Action St. Louis has given St. Louis a new mayor, a new circuit attorney, helped expand Medicaid. The list goes on and on.
And it's a congressperson.
Hello, Cori Bush, right? We are, and what is clear to me is that Action St. Louis and the coalition of organizations and people that they work with are never just focused on a single candidate or a single ballot measure, right? They're always focused on building people power to do whatever it is that the people determine needs to be done. So I think about people like her building that community and using our cultural assets to make sure that we engage our own power. I think about people like Brittany Farrell, who is a nurse and a powerful health practitioner who has really used her work to focus on the health of Black children and Black parents, right? And so she's working on a documentary now called You Lucky You Got a Mama, which is built out of a project about Black maternal health. But she works closely with an organization called Jama Birth Village. And Jama Birth Village is literally a place where Black doulas are trained and sent out into the community so that when our women and our pregnant people pick up the phone and don't get the answers that they're looking for from those official medical practitioners and the hospitals and the clinics, they've got somewhere to turn. People who look like them, who care about them, and who are trained to serve us uniquely, right? That's us building our own institution and not waiting on somebody else to do it because we're waiting on their medical degree or their certification. That's who we are, right? That's what we come from. That's our power. And I just, you can't create a Jama Birth Village or an Action St. Louis or be a Cori Bush or a Kayla Reed or a Brittany Farrell if you are not both simultaneously clear about what materially has to happen for Black people and also what spiritually and morally has to happen for Black people, about how we have to believe in ourselves and our own assets while we pursue the equity and the liberation on paper and in reality that we deserve.
Yes. I'm ready. Let's do it. Let's go. Oh, you mentioned Ferguson in your response just there, and as we were talking earlier about Black power and some of the fears and the stigmas that have been attached to it, going back to the 60s, some of that comes from this notion of, the same thing they would ask Kwame Ture about Stokely Carmichael at the time, about trying to equate Black power to, oh, you're violent, right? Flash forward to to Ferguson or to Minneapolis, right, and to last summer of protests, and that is still something that folks try to an image that folks try to create to make us think that that Black power or power at all is something negative. It's something for us to be afraid of. It's something that we shouldn't want. It's something or that certain expressions of our power and expressions of our frustrations, for that matter, are somehow negative and can't bear fruit, right? But as you said, out of the pain of Ferguson came all those things that you just laid out. What are your thoughts about the ways that people still try to so give all these negative connotations to what it means to be fighting for Black power?
I mean, that's a tale as old as time, right? It's funny because growing up in St. Louis, there was always this kind of underlying notion that we were polite, right? This is Midwestern politeness. So the fact that we were a deeply segregated city in all of the ways, the fact that you can literally cross the street of Del Mar, that we call the Del Mar Divide, and see totally different racial demographics, totally different life expectancies, totally different median incomes, totally different graduation rates, all of that was never to be spoken of. In fact, St. Louis was proud of not being one of the cities that burned in '68. As if people were proud that like the righteous fire, the righteous frustration never really touched us because we were busy being polite. We were busy sweeping it all under the rug, right? That we were, there were bits and pieces, but we weren't Chicago. We weren't Watts. We weren't Detroit, right? Fast forward to 2014, there were lots of people, Black and white, who were like, we were supposed to be above the standard. We were supposed to be above this notion of disruption, of uprising. That was never supposed to be St. Louis because we are politely racist here, right? And one of the reasons I think that Ferguson was so powerful for people is because St. Louis is flyover country. St. Louis was supposed to be Chicago, right? We were a major destination. We were, there was jazz, there was art, there was a cultural scene, there was industry, there were railroads, there was a train stop. We got a whole lot of Mississippians where the train ended, right? You hear people like Isabel Wilkerson talk about this, and a whole bunch of people migrated, and St. Louis was supposed to be the spot where it happened. And then the Chicago Canal gets built, and Chicago keeps growing, and St. Louis doesn't. So you've got this place that has been forgotten about in a lot of ways, especially post the Industrial Revolution, that people just didn't think about, right? It was just this big swath of the Midwest, and the only city that matters in the Midwest is Chicago. And if you're not Chicago, you don't matter. So all of a sudden, for the place that people forgot about to be the place that was on fire, caught the world's attention because they said, what has been happening in this place we have been ignoring for so long? Ferguson, where is Ferguson? Is it a city? Is it a county? Is it a suburb? Is it an urban area? I remember in the early days, people were mischaracterizing Ferguson so much. And I was like, you really actually don't understand how the economic, how the intentional economic separation of St. Louis City and St. Louis County created these tiny little fiefdoms like Ferguson, like Florissant, 15 minutes away, where I grew up, like Kinloch, where Maxine Waters is from, like Belnor, like all of these little tiny places that have their own police departments and their own municipalities and their own mayors, and they raise their money off of our backs because they terrorize us. They pull us over all the time. They get us into court. They make us pay all of these fines and fees, and that's how they pay their salaries. So we had to illustrate that for people. And then folks started saying, well, where else is this happening? And is that same kind of rage present there too? You know, Dr. King said a riot is the language of the unheard. And a place like Ferguson, a place like St. Louis, Missouri, had been unheard for a very, very long time. And I say that the tale is as old as time with, people trying to characterize Black power movements as inherently violent or negative because they tried to use Dr. King the same way. And I remember watching this interview of his where the interviewer the reporter was like, why don't you denounce these actions? And not only, does he refer to this idea of a riot being the language of the unheard, he reminds us that the only way to actually quell uprisings, truly, so that they never happen again, is to concern yourself with the conditions that created the rage in the first place. He was essentially saying to us, you want to use me to undermine people who are trying to use their voices by attacking the symptoms when you don't want to pay attention to the virus. And I won't be used that way, right? It's important that Black folks decide I won't be used that way. And I think that there's a power in understanding what it means for a people who have been constantly maligned and marginalized to rise up with whatever tools we have at our disposal and to always point back to the system, to always make sure that we never let systems off the hook, to always make sure that we say, while you want to make the leading news coverage this or that, let's actually talk about Michael Brown Jr. Let's actually talk about how much the Ferguson Police Department and broader St. Louis police departments terrorize us every day. Let's actually talk about the fact that, as we said on the streets, Ferguson is everywhere and that you can pay attention here, but you're going to suddenly see this pop up in Cleveland, and you're going to see this pop up in Oakland and in New York City and in Florida and in all of these places that you forgot about because Ferguson is everywhere. And until you deal with the system that created it this way, you're not actually going to see an end to this. So it's not new. And I spent the fall semester 2018 as a fellow at Harvard's Institute of Politics. And my study group was on redefining power, right? It was about understanding power as an abundant asset and not a finite asset, as something to share and not something to hoard, as white dominant culture wants to teach us to be. And one of my sessions, we spent time really talking about nonviolence versus, as one author called it, not nonviolent. So you want to be concerned with property damage. I'm telling you to be concerned with life damage. I'm telling you to be concerned with broken spines, not broken windows, right? And that was always an interesting course. I know it was probably a conversation that rarely, if ever, happened at the Harvard Kennedy School. But it was always an interesting conversation because where we would get back around to eventually, people would always come back to, well, why are people this angry in the first place? And that is always the question that we should be asking ourselves, because until we find systemic solutions, we are going to consistently believe that there is negativity associated with, or we will consistently be threatened by people showing their power. Because if we stop hoarding power, people won't have to snatch it. You know what I'm saying? Like, if we stop trying to be selfish about things where we have abundance, like money, like food, like water, if we stop commodifying the things that everybody should have access to freely, that we actually give people the space to exhibit their power in a whole lot of ways that enrich all of us. But when you repress people and when you marginalize people, and when you malign people, I don't understand how you could expect anything different.
Right.
It has happened all across the world. Mm-hmm. It has happened era after era, right. Generation after generation, empire after